Hollywood has spent the last 50 years lying directly to your face about what it means to be a mafia boss. They want you to believe it is all about sitting in a dimly lit study, wearing a custom-tailored tuxedo while listening to classical opera. They want you to think you spend your afternoons granting elegant favors to desperate people on the day of your daughter's wedding. But the cinematic universe completely leaves out the part where you spend 4 hours in a damp basement arguing with a guy named Jimmy 2 times over an unpaid water bill. The reality of being an American Mafia Godfather is not a glamorous crime epic. It is actually just running a highly illegal corporation full of unhinged employees who are all actively trying to steal your job or accidentally record you talking to the federal government. Imagine you finally climb the ranks and get promoted to the highest position in the organization. You think you have finally made it to the top of the world. But the very first thing you realize is that your new job is basically just middle management with a much higher risk of spontaneous combustion. Your daily routine shifts from committing exciting high-stakes robberies to dealing with the most exhausting human resources nightmare on planet Earth. Before you can even enjoy the corner office, you have to bring in new entry-level recruits. In the corporate world, people sign an employment contract and take an online seminar about workplace diversity. In the Cosa Nostra, your onboarding process requires a lot more theatrical production. The prospective recruit is brought into a windowless back room of a suburban social club. He stands before you and the senior executive board of the family. You take a silver needle and prick his trigger finger until he starts to bleed. Then you drop his blood directly onto a paper card depicting a Catholic saint. Usually it is Saint Francis or the Virgin Mary, because you like to keep things traditional. You light the paper card on fire and drop it directly into his open palms. The recruit has to pass the burning holy card back and forth between his hands so he does not get a third-degree burn. While the saint is actively turning into ash, he must repeat a sacred oath. He swears that if he ever betrays the secrets of the dead family, his soul will burn, just like that piece of paper. This is a massive amount of psychological pressure just to secure a entry-level position that does not even offer basic dental insurance. It is the ultimate non-disclosure agreement. But the moment the ceremony is over, you realize them. Corporate ladder is completely covered in grease. The modern structure of the American Mafia was not created by medieval kings. It was actually designed in 1931 by a man named Charles Lucky Luciano. He looked at the chaotic landscape of organized crime and realized that killing your rivals every single week was a terrible business model. Turf wars were incredibly expensive and ruined the quarterly profit margins. So he decided to run the underworld exactly like a modern Wall Street conglomerate. He created the Commission, which was essentially a board of directors for the 5 families of New York. The hierarchy was designed to be perfectly rigid and organized. You are the boss, which means you sit at the very top of the organizational chart. Directly below you is the underboss, who acts as your chief operating officer. Then you have the consigliere, who is a smooth-talking counselor, designed to give you unbiased legal and strategic advice. Below them are the capo regimes, who are basically highly stressed regional managers running specific geographic territories. And at the bottom, you have the soldiers, who do all the actual manual labor and heavy lifting. On paper, it looks like a beautiful textbook example of corporate efficiency. In reality, it is an absolute madhouse. Your capo regimes are supposed to be professional executives running smooth operations. Instead, they are usually aggressive guys named Big Mike who are currently hyperventilating because they lost $50,000 of your money on a football game. They are supposed to hit their extortion key performance indicators every single month, but they spend most of their time text messaging their mistresses or getting into fistfights in the parking lot of a local diner. And just like a regular corporate gig, the mandatory weekly meetings are a complete psychological torture session. You cannot just send a calendar invite on Google Meet to discuss the weekly numbers. You have to drive to a smoky social club in Queens that smells like stale espresso and 20 years of cheap tobacco. You sit around a card table with 6 men who are all wearing tracksuits that match a little too perfectly. Everyone is smiling and laughing at your jokes. But every single person in that room is secretly calculating exactly how much money they would make if you suddenly passed away in your sleep. And it is like the most intense corporate performance review imaginable, but with significantly more leather jackets. The actual daily grind of a Godfather completely lacks any form of cinematic majesty. You do not spend your days plotting global domination or stealing diamonds from a high-security vault. You spend 90% of your time micromanaging incredibly mundane and low-margin businesses. Your empire is built on things like garbage hauling contracts and vending machine routes. You control the local concrete unions, and you take a small percentage of every hijacked shipment of olive oil that enters the port. On a typical Tuesday afternoon, you might find yourself sitting in the back of the Bergen Hunting and Fishing Club. This was the famous headquarters where John Gotti used to run his entire criminal enterprise. You are sitting under a buzzing fluorescent light bulb, trying to eat a sandwich. Suddenly, your top earner walks in to report a major crisis. You brace yourself for news of a federal investigation or a war with a rival family. Instead, he tells you that the local bakery is refusing to pay their weekly protection fee because the owner claims your guys ruined his latest batch of cannoli. This is the glamorous life of a criminal mastermind. You are a multi-millionaire kingpin, but you are currently wasting your breath arguing over $100 worth of pastry goods. You have to maintain your fearsome reputation while simultaneously acting as an unpaid customer service representative. If you react too soft, the other families will think you are losing your edge. If you react too hard, you will attract the attention of the local police department, who are already parked across the street in a dirty van. Every single decision you make is a delicate balancing act between extreme violence and petty bookkeeping. And when an employee performance issue inevitably comes up, you cannot just hand them a severance package. Human resources in the mafia is handled with a completely different set of guidelines. If a soldier starts stealing from the gambling operation, you cannot just fire him. If you fire him, he will immediately walk across the street and talk to the district attorney out of spite. So you have to invite him out to a lovely steak dinner to discuss his future with the company. You sit across from him and watch him eat an expensive ribeye, while you nod politely and tell him everything is going to be fine. You have to look him directly in the eyes and smile, while knowing that your underboss is currently waiting in the alleyway with a baseball bat. It requires a level of emotional detachment that would make a corporate psychopath blush. The pure paranoia of the job is what eventually breaks every single Godfather. When you are the boss, you can never truly turn your brain off. Paranoia becomes your primary personality trait. It completely replaces your morning routine. Normal people check their emails when they wake up in the morning. A Mafia Godfather checks the underside of his luxury sedan to see if anyone attached a pipe bomb to the exhaust pipe. You can never sit with your back to the door in a public restaurant. You can never accept a cup of coffee from a soldier without wondering if he added a little bit of rat poison to the sugar. The history of the American Mafia is completely littered with internal coups and sudden corporate takeovers. In 1957, a famous boss named Albert Anastasia went to a hotel barbershop in Manhattan for a routine haircut. He was sitting in the chair with a hot towel over his face, relaxing, after a long week of racketeering. Two gunmen walked into the room and shot him directly through the mirror. He never even got to see who killed him because his own ambitious underlings decided it was time for a management restructure. Decades later, in 1985, Paul Castellano was the head of the powerful Gambino family. He was pulled up to Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan for a pre-dinner meeting. As he stepped out of his car, a group of assassins wearing identical trench coats opened fire on him in the middle of rush hour traffic. The entire hit was orchestrated by John Gotti, who was tired of waiting for his turn to be the boss. In your line of work, a promotion does not come with a bigger paycheck and a nice plaque. It comes with a semi-automatic weapon and a complete lack of remorse. So if your underboss suddenly pulls up to the social club in a brand new Cadillac, you do not congratulate him on his success. You spend the next 3 weeks staring intensely at your car ignition, wondering if turning the key will accidentally launch you into low Earth orbit. But your absolute worst enemy is not a rival shooter looking for a promotion. The most dangerous thing in your world is a specific piece of legislation passed by Congress in 1970. It is called the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, but most people just call it the RICO Act. Before RICO was passed, the federal government had a terrible time trying to convict mafia bosses. The Godfather would never personally commit a crime. He would just whisper an order to his underboss, who would whisper it to a capo, who would tell a soldier to go do the dirty work. By the time the crime was actually committed, the boss was 5 steps removed from the situation. He could just sit in his backyard swimming pool and claim. He had absolutely no idea what his employees were doing. But RICO completely changed the rules of the game. It allowed prosecutors to convict a boss simply for managing a criminal enterprise. If your employees commit a crime to benefit your organization, you are legally responsible for it, even if you were asleep in bed when it happened. Suddenly, the feds did not need to catch you with a smoking gun. They just needed to prove that you were the CEO of the company. The FBI started packing high-tech audio surveillance equipment into every single corner of New York. They hid microphones inside the drywall of the social clubs. They planted bugs inside the public payphones outside the favorite restaurants. They even managed to plant a listening device inside, the personal apartment of John Gotti's top associate. Suddenly, the sacred code of absolute silence began to fall apart. Omerta worked perfectly for decades because the alternative was a brief stay in a local jail. But once RICO entered the room, the feds were suddenly handing out 40-year prison sentences without the possibility of parole. The government looked at your top earners and offered them a very simple choice. They could either spend the rest of their natural lives inside a concrete box, or they could wear a hidden microphone and tell the grand jury every single thing they knew. At that exact moment, the legendary code of honor completely evaporated. Everyone suddenly started singing faster than a Disney princess. Your closest friends and your most loyal soldiers will look you right in the eye and then immediately walk into an FBI field office to sign a cooperation agreement. They will trade 40 years of absolute loyalty for a nice suburban house in Ohio with a manicured laugh, lawn, and a brand new identity. The famous underboss, Sammy the Bull Gravano, flipped on John Gotti and sent his own boss to prison for life, just to save his own skin. When the pressure gets high enough, the family bond turns out to be about as strong as a wet paper towel. So what does the actual retirement plan look like for a modern Godfather? In the regular corporate world, you get a nice gold watch and a comfortable pension fund. In the Cosa Nostra, your retirement options are incredibly limited. You are either going to end up in a beautiful marble mausoleum, or you are going to spend 23 hours a day inside a maximum security federal penitentiary. Even the most clever and intelligent bosses in history could not outrun this system. Al Capone was the most feared and powerful criminal in America during the 1920s. He controlled entire police departments and had an army of gunmen at his disposal. But he did not go down in a dramatic shootout with the authorities. He was ultimately taken down by a group of quiet accountants from the Internal Revenue Service. They discovered he was spending millions of dollars on luxury clothes and hotels, but had never bothered to file an income tax return. He survived a dozen assassination attempts only to be defeated by a spreadsheet. There is absolutely no escaping the mundane reality of the legal system. If the shooters do not get you, the bookkeeping will. So if you are still sitting on your couch dreaming about the glamorous life of a mafia kingpin, you might want to reconsider your career goals. The velvet tracksuits and the expensive steak dinners look great on a movie screen. But the reality is just a lifetime of intense anxiety and bad coffee. Are you the kind of person who could handle the intense pressure of the corporate ladder? Or would you immediately flip to the feds the moment they mention a prison sentence? Let me know down in the comments below.